After a disappointing first year with Damian Lillard, a lot of people, including myself, thought the duo of him and Giannis could still put it together and form a strong contending team. While that hope has slipped over the course of another mediocre year, there was still a sliver of hope that they could put it together for a respectable postseason run. But once again, injuries have plagued them. Damian Lillard has blood clots in his calf, which will sideline him for the rest of the year, and it could even very well be career-threatening. This team's core is old, they have no draft capital or young players to leverage in trades, and worst of all, Kyle Kuzma is on this team. Yuck. So the Milwaukee Bucks are falling apart again. I think this might be the one that finally does it. Hello everybody, welcome to Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel and drop a like on this video if you have not already. We have recently passed 130,000 subscribers, so the new goal is for us to get to 150. So if you are new here, it would be appreciated if you joined. Also, check us out over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you'd like to enjoy this as an audio-only experience. So I want to say up top, with Damian Lillard being out for the rest of the year with a very serious blood clot problem, first of all, I just want to say we hope that this is not as serious as it could be. When we talked about blood clots with Wemby, my understanding was that blood clots are not too serious necessarily, especially if they're in your upper body, but having them in your legs is a really, really bad spot to have them in terms of your career continuing, and he has it in his calf. I'm not one for prayer, but he's in my thoughts, I guess. Before I go in today's video, I want to talk about our sponsor, Factor. If you're like me, a person who's always busy with work and life, then you probably don't have an ideal diet. Generally speaking, for me, eating consistently and eating well has been extremely difficult in the past. Fortunately, today's sponsor, Factor, makes both so much easier. Factor is more affordable than takeout and even more convenient with fresh, never frozen meals delivered right to your door. Then it's only 2 minutes in the microwave and your meal is ready. If you have a hectic schedule like me, being able to prepare something quickly like you can with Factor really makes it easier. Factor is also very customizable with over 35 meals to choose per week, and you can specify options to your dietary restrictions. There are calorie smart options if you're trying to lose weight, keto options if you're trying to dodge carbs, and protein plus if you're getting back in the gym. Lately, I've been enjoying their vegetarian options just to try some new things. Factor eliminates the hassle of prepping, cooking, and cleaning up. Simply heat and savor the good stuff. Head to Factor75.com or use the link in the description and use code 50ALSORUSTY to get 50% off of your first Factor box. Again, that is code 50ALSORUSTY to get 50% off of your first box. And a huge shout out to Factor for sponsoring this video. Giannis this year has been having a historic season. I think this is the best version of him that we have ever seen. And mind you, I'm saying that about a two-time MVP and Defensive Player of the Year. In his last 5 seasons, he has averaged 30 points, 11.5 rebounds, and 6 assists on 63% true shooting. Not only has he not won MVP in that stretch, he didn't even get higher than 3rd place, mostly getting 4th place. And in the last 4 years, he has yet to even get in a seriously competitive series for the finals. I think the closest was against the Celtics in 2022, and they lost that in 6 because there was no Chris Middleton. Not been very good last couple of years in Milwaukee. His mid-range season this year has been insane. He is statistically one of the best mid-range shooters in the league, one of the most prolific mid-range shooters in the league. I believe he is top 3 or at least top 5 in points scored in the mid-range this year. And him adding that dynamic to his offense just makes him all the more unguardable. If it's like, yeah, anytime I step inside the 3-point line, there's at least a 45% chance that the shot I take is going to go in, upwards of 50+%, because I believe is like 10 to 16 foot mid-range shot is up there. Let me look this up. Giannis has had a mid-range game to an extent at other points in his career, but this is the first time where he has truly actually been excellent at it. Yeah, this year from 10 to 16 feet, he's at 48%, and from 16 feet to the 3-point line, he's at 45%. 10 to 16 foot range is a whole 5% better than his career high before that, and over 10% better than his career average. And and that 44% on long twos is 4% in the second best of his career and 7% better than his career at large. So a massive, massive leap in terms of his ability to shoot the ball inside the arc. He hasn't competed for titles in years, and it really does not seem like he's going to going forward. I felt like this team was doomed as soon as they hired Doc Rivers. While I wasn't necessarily all that against firing Adrian Griffin, doing so to hire Doc Rivers instead was a terrible, terrible, terrible decision. I said at the time that they should have just sucked it up and accepted and went back to Mike Budenholzer and said, "Our bad, my guy. Sorry for firing you after your brother died. What if we gave you a hefty contract and you fix this fucking team?" Because he would have been the best coach on the market, and there's a previous rapport there. A lot of these players are the same core of the team that won the championship in 2021. And while I've been someone who has, criticized Mike Budenholzer a lot in the past, I think this franchise would be in a very different position if he was at the helm. His offense, Doc Rivers that is incredibly basic. More or less, he gave up on the idea of a Dame and Giannis pick and roll, and it pretty much just became Dame and Giannis taking turns. And that's good enough for a respectable offense, but it's not good enough for a great one, and it's not good enough for a duo that was supposed to be truly unstoppable. Brook Lopez, he is not quite over the hill, but he has started to ascend it, and he is getting close to the peak where you start. Actually, I would say he is at the peak, ready to get on the precipice of going over the hill. I'm surprised it wasn't this year. I'm surprised it wasn't the year before that. So I'm not going to outright dismiss the fact that he could still be a very good starting center 2 years from now. Eventually, that well will dry up, and you will not have your perfect center to play next to Giannis. Kyle Kuzma fucking stinks. I thought for a second that he could contribute to some good basketball on this team, and for like the first couple of games that actually did look like it was going to be reality, but since then he has sunk back into that reality that was actually real. He's at 28% from three as a Milwaukee Buck, same as he was averaging with the Washington Wizards, and I've kind of come to the conclusion that banking on Kyle Kuzma being a good three-point shooter is just something that we have no reason to do. There is no history of him being a really good three-point shooter. His best seasons are 36%, and he has far more seasons in the 30s. For his career, he shoots almost 6 of these fucking threes a game while being a 33% shooter from outside. That is crazy volume for how much he misses them. In fact, since his second year in Washington, he is taking 6.3 three-point attempts per game and shooting 32.3% on them. He is a bad three-point shooter for that volume, for sure, and it does not surprise me in the least bit that his shooting has been a problem with the Bucks. And when you have Giannis there, you really don't want to have Kuzma shooting the three ball poorly too. It's just not a good look at all. Bobby Portis is somebody who I've kind of grown to dislike as a player. Some Bucks fans have come over to see my side on that. Others are still very much blinded by how well he played in 2021, and I can understand why you would get to that conclusion, but I just don't think he's a good enough scorer to justify how shot happy he truly is. He is a very, very high volume shooter relative to his touches. He is a black hole. The possession almost always ends when he touches the ball in any kind of advantageous position to score, or even if it's just in the mid post and he wants to shoot a face-up mid-range jumper or try to get a hook shot off against a guy. He's just not good enough at that stuff to justify how much he does it and to justify how little he contributes otherwise. He's a fine rebounder. He's not a disaster defensively, but I can't actually compliment his abilities other than he can kind of score in the isolation a little bit. So he's a player who takes up a big role, a big chunk of change, who you could not very easily, but you could find someone who actually contributes to winning basketball more. But Bobby Portis is a staple of the franchise, so we're just going to keep accepting this mediocre play from him. Kevin Porter Jr. choked his girlfriend, and Gary Trent Jr., Andre Jackson, and Taurean Prince are all pretty damn solid role players, and definitely the types of guys that you would want to be your 7th, 8th, 9 man, but you don't have a strong 6th man, and and even then, you could definitely do better than these guys. So the bench unit is far from anything special. Torian and Gary can hit a catch-and-shoot three. Andre can play some defense, and that's pretty much the extent of their abilities. As I mentioned, they do not have almost all of their future picks. They do not have their first for this year, and for the next 3 years after that, teams have the right to swap, and the favor is not in Milwaukee's way. So if Milwaukee were to tank and just be bad over the next couple of years, well, another team is going to reap the benefits of that draft pick. They also don't have their 2029 first round pick altogether, and then again you have a pick swap in the 2030 season. So this nightmare is not going to end until 2031. Not only do they not have these picks if they want to tank, but they, of course, also don't have these picks to trade to make the roster better. As I mentioned, they don't really have young guys like that. Andre Jackson is pretty much the extent of it, so they're not going to get a whole bunch of value out of him either. You have some bigger contracts in Brook Lopez and Bobby Portis, or Pat Connaughton if he's still getting paid like that, or Kyle Kuzma. All of these guys make an amount of salary, and they're a quality enough NBA player that you could shift some stuff around, maybe get a diamond in the rough, maybe buy in on a guy who, seems overpaid but would be worthy of more opportunity and could fit there theoretically. But what we're talking about is extremely difficult. What they would have to do to make this roster work would be some all-time great general managing in order to pull that off, and given the track record that got us here, I'm willing to bet that that's not going to happen. They're kind of fucked. There's really no other way to say it. They might just be fucked. So, will Giannis demand a trade? That's the big thing. Giannis always does this thing where periodically he pops in, makes a comment about why he isn't very happy and why he could very well leave, and that he's very open to leaving if it is forced on him. And to me, and now is as good a time as any to just say that it was outright forced on him. He's going to be going into a playoff series completely alone again. He's going to be expected to carry them on both ends of the floor again, just as he has for a large majority of the regular season, aside from Dame's production. Yeah, it's just unfair. They're asking him to do so much. It's hard to think of many superstars in the NBA who bear a larger burden than Giannis currently does. In fact, yeah, I think that's the pick. Like, Jokic has a crazy offensive burden, but he's not a key part of their defense. Giannis is the best defender on the Bucks, like, by a pretty substantial margin, even if Brook Lopez is still pretty good these days. I do think a Giannis trade is pretty much inevitable. Maybe not this year, but very soon. I'm not going to harp on where he may go too much here, because I want to do a little Rusty Buckets video going over some trade destinations for him. You'll probably get a bigger video on that if any kind of drama comes up in this offseason. Maybe after the Bucks get eliminated from the playoffs, you'll get a larger video then. I think this offseason Giannis will be traded. And if it's not this offseason, it will probably be the next one. And if it's not the next one, it will certainly be the next one, because I just don't see any world in which this team improves on the margins enough, on top of the fact that Damian Lillard's career could very well be over. Now, what's also interesting is, what exactly do you do with Dame if you are also trading Giannis? Obviously, the answer is you're trading Dame, but to where, for how much? How many assets are you really going to get for a 33-year-old point guard who's making $50 million a year? Probably not a ton. You would think they want to get some of their own draft capital back. You could do that through the Giannis deal. I think it was the Brooklyn Nets that traded back for some of their own picks. Like, doing something like that could especially help your future going forward. But I think the Giannis Bucks era is pretty much at its conclusion. With that in mind, I just wanted to spend the rest of the video, last little tangent, just looking back on the Giannis Bucks era. I feel like this era should still be considered a success, even with what the last few years have been, because this team got a championship at the end of the day. 2021, the Bucks won a fucking championship, the first time since Kareem Abdul-Jabbar brought it home in 1971. That says a lot, man. Like, that is a huge, huge thing. A 50-year championship drought, and Giannis brought them one. I don't think he can retire as the greatest Buck of all time after this if he were to leave so soon. Then again, if the answer is Kareem, Giannis played there longer, put up more numbers in that time, and also brought them a championship. I don't know. I think you could probably have a debate about it, but it seemed like there wouldn't be a debate about it because Giannis would just play the rest of his career out there and rack up numbers, maybe another championship or two, and then it would just be undisputed. But it's going to be left disputed. I feel similarly about that to like how Luka was supposed to be the GOAT of the Dallas Mavericks, and then he was just robbed of that opportunity because of a trade. Obviously, in this case, it wouldn't be Giannis being robbed so much as him just taking care of his own destiny, but one way or the other, it's a little upsetting. The 2020s have been an era where winning multiple championships is not happening. 2019, the Raptors won their first championship in franchise history, and since then it has not been a repeat. 2020 Lakers, 2021 Bucks, 2022 Warriors, 2023 Nuggets, 2024 Celtics, and there's a decent chance the Celtics will repeat this year, but I am betting against it because I just think that's the landscape of the NBA. So a championship followed by a couple of years of struggle, kind of the exact thing that we're seeing out of a lot of these teams. 2020 Lakers won their title, years of struggle following that. The Bucks, years of struggle following that. The Warriors, years of struggle following that. The Denver Nuggets, years of struggle following that. I don't think it's actually that big of an indictment on the Bucks or Giannis that they did not get back there. Injuries have also played a very significant role in this, and as much as we have the power of hindsight to be like they should not have done the Drew Holiday Damian Lillard swap, it made complete sense at the time. There wasn't a single person who was like, this is a bad move, this will hurt them more than it helps them. Everybody knew the defense would be worse, but they thought the offense would be a whole hell of a lot better. But as a whole, Giannis is, at least in recent history, the most important Buck ever, and I hope and pray that Bucks fans will recognize this situation for what it is and not blame Giannis for it. I think they will do that. I don't think he will have to deal with boos or anything like that. It might be determined a little bit by how he plays it. You know, if he's just like, I'm only going to this team, fuck you, the same way that Damian Lillard did, well, that kind of turned the fan base against Lillard after being there for a decade. He needs to be a little bit careful about that, but I think his legacy in Milwaukee is secure. His jersey number will be up in those rafters, and he'll be known as a historic player with that franchise and arguably the GOAT. We'll have that conversation if it happens. Who's the GOAT Milwaukee Buck of all time with this context? Because I think it ends up being a fairly even case. I think Giannis spent a couple more years there than Kareem did, but I don't know, man. The legacy should still be positive, but right now it's really hard to be positive. But yeah, shout out to the Bucks for being a fucking disaster and giving me something to talk about. The playoffs are coming soon. I'm really, really excited for it. I'm intending on, don't hold me to it because it might not happen, but I really want to try and cover and recap and discuss literally every single playoff game this year. You may have noticed that we have ramped up the content production around here, and we've just been trying to get that muscle memory in place so that we can be on top of our shit when the playoffs come around. Also, there is actually going to be a slight reduction in upload frequency over the next 2.5, 3 weeks, just because we want to be sure that we have that energy saved up for the playoffs and we're prepared for the playoffs. But I'm looking forward to covering it. I hope you guys are looking forward to that coverage as well. But yeah, that's it. Shout out to Nick for editing this video, and goodbye.